Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Veg Networking Canada, where vegan plant-based people and companies connect and collaborate. It's important to honor, acknowledge, and respect that many of us are located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of many Indigenous peoples of Canada. Today, we have a special guest with us, an impact consultant focused on giving voices to activists and exposing/monitoring environmental health hazards, a champion for national and international fundraising, powered by love and dedication at the intersection of veganism and Buddhism. Veg Networking Canada is pleased to introduce the founder of the Vegan Report podcast and Map Your Health. Welcome, Rayane Laddi.
Thank you so much, Justin, for the warm welcome, and Sandra too. Very happy to be here.
We're thrilled to have you here. And for everybody else who's with us live and going to be listening a little bit later on, let's jump in and tell us what led you to go vegan plant-based.
Short answer, I don't know. And I'm sure it's an addition of many different factors. I think I was born with a certain kind of empathy towards animals, and that's what drove me slowly to consider becoming vegan. I remember when I was a kid being surrounded by animals and being a witness of the cruelty and the violence they were victim of. Um, I remember my pet dog. I had a pet dog as a small child, which was rescued by my mother from a family member who was neglectful towards that dog. And I remember how that dog died. He was poisoned by my neighbors. We suspect that they did not like the noise that the dog was making in the garden, and so they fed him rat poison, and this is how his life ended. And then I remember the cats in my neighborhood. I remember how they looked, eyes missing, uh, uh, parts of their tail missing, all skinny and sickly, and how I would feed them. And against the wishes of my family, they were afraid I would catch some disease or um, something else. Um, but I would feed them. I would protect them against other children my age or older who would do all sorts of things to them. Run after them or catch them and take them to whatever place. Um, and so I remember those animals. I remember um, what they went through. And I guess that stuck with me. At the age of 14 years old, I told my parents I decided to become vegetarian. And I remember my mother saying, yes, of course. And then that same day at dinner, she prepared um, a tomato salad and it looked disgusting. And then she made another plate of barbecue ribs, which was one of my favorite. And she said, you choose. I mean, you're still young. You can become vegetarian later. But that's what it looks like to be a vegetarian, eating a tomato salad instead of ribs. But, if you change your mind and maybe want to try doing this later in life, I prepared some ribs for you. And of course, I was too weak to resist that offer. And that's how my first attempt to become a vegetarian was, sabotaged. And later at the age of, 17, 18 years old, I fully transitioned into a vegan diet and lifestyle. I like to say that I matured into becoming vegan since all of my legal adulthood was a vegan, was vegan. And so, yeah, that's basically the story.
Wow, that's quite an impact, having that happen to, we've heard the term like furry friend or furry family member, right? When it's related to pets, but to have that happen, yeah, pretty impactful for sure. So switching gears professionally now, as an impact consultant and the work that you do with the Vegan Report podcast and Map Your Health and probably some other ventures as well. Can you tell us more about that? Like what led you to become an entrepreneur and what the entrepreneurship looks like for you right now?
Of course. Well, let me correct you. I am a fundraising consultant. Fundraising is impactful, but I don't know what a consultant in impact means. So yeah, the vegan report came first. Um, I was doing fundraising for all sorts of charities out there, good causes, and I was forever frustrated by the lack of coverage from mainstream media, journalists, reporters of the trials that some vulnerable populations went through. As a fundraiser, something that is very important is to get media coverage of your cause. But then, if no one cares, if reporters are not doing their job properly, if they're not pursuing the story, and you have to just beg for their attention all the time, you become frustrated and quite disillusioned with the media landscape. And so, my first instinct, as someone who's practical and solution driven, was to create my own, media platform. And it started with something called the Arms Cross podcast, and that was my first attempt into, doing podcasting. And I wanted to just cover the stories that were very important, affected vulnerable population, but were not discussed on mainstream media, so were not on the radar of most people. And I had great success in getting wonderful guests, influential guests, pertinent guests on the podcast. Um, and some of them were in the vegan animal rights space. So I was vegan. Um, and so, of course, I had to do some podcast episodes on that issue. And I realized that um, people that came and listened to the podcast did not want me to just go all over the place and cover all sorts of issues that they might not be interested in. And that if you want to do a podcast that works and that drives engagement, you needed to focus on a certain niche. And so I decided to focus on vegan activism, animal rights activism, and basically give myself the mission of inspiring people. Well, first of all, educating them on what's happening on the activism front, and also educating them on how to get involved in that space. Um, and it was kind of a hard choice to make, Um, um, that meant that I would not cover those other issues that were important to me. But then, um, if you compare different social issues out there, I think the one that gets the least attention is the animal cause. And so it still felt true to my first intention to, shed light on um, issues that were cast into the darkness of, um, um, you know, mainstream media consciousness. So yeah, so it started with the podcast, and then it also fed my efforts as a fundraiser. So it connected me with organizations that needed my services. I feel that there is a lack of education in the fundraising space in charities that defend animals. And so I, offered my services pro bono, but also, as a professional. And yeah, uh, it fed into my consulting work. And I don't know if I answered your initial question, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. In terms of the original question was, tell us more about your entrepreneurial origin story and how
Mm.
things started. And so that makes sense. And that's nice to hear. And yeah, you're right. We've had guests on before from registered Canadian charities or nonprofits, and it's absolutely true that the fundraising um, support could definitely be greater, and more information and education and more skills around it. Certainly. Now, in terms of you and your brands, plural, where are you going in the future?
That's a great question. I would say I'm following my heart, you know. I'm keeping true to my heart, and my instinct. I think that being a great leader and I guess entrepreneur is being able to trust your instinct and having a great instinct at that. There are so many decisions to make, so many choices to make, and which one is the right one. And even with AI right now, I don't think that we have the capability to just process all of the data that those decisions and choices mean. And as you know, leader, executive entrepreneurs, um, you need to make those choices on a daily basis. And so, how do you make those choices? What is the right choice? And that's when instinct comes in, I believe. Um, and yeah, so there's that. There's pursuing the podcast and opening up the podcast to more collaborative work. Um, I, I'm working on, sharing that podcast with other activists in this space and not making it, just my podcast, but making it a platform that serves all of the community. So I'm preparing content that um, um, is the product of partnerships with organizations or activists, individuals. Of course, my consulting work, still pursuing that. I mentioned, helping charities in the pro-animal space. Right now, I champion Dharma Voices for Animals, which is at the intersection of two of my passions, veganism, the pro-animal world, and Buddhism. Um, and it is an interesting argument, making the pro-animal argument from a religious perspective. That is something very stimulating to me, from intellectually. And so it's very exciting to work on that. And also, there's Map Your Health, which is my newest project, my baby. So, Map Your Health that came about last summer when I was jogging, and all of a sudden there was this weird smell in the air. It was not natural. It was something industrial because it smelled like burnt plastic. And I kept wondering, what did I just inhale? And um, is this, I'm here running, taking care of my health, but at the same time inhaling some strange pollutant in the air. Am I actually actively hurting my health by jogging outside? And I wondered if there was something, a website, an app that could tell me what's hidden out there in terms of pollutants, not just in the air, but also in the water. Um, and I, kept looking, did not find what I was looking for, and decided to create that tool for people, um, and to help them, make decisions in terms of lifestyle. Should I go jogging outside? Are my surroundings safe for outside activities? But also, should I be living in that space? Should I be traveling in that town or that city or that country? And if I do, what kind of precautions should I take? Those are the questions I want to answer with that tool. And so, yeah, right now I'm in the phase of gathering contacts for the waiting list before the launch of the app. So if you want to, subscribe to the waiting list, it's mapyourhealth.info and just put your name and email.
Wow, that was a lot. And just starting on the back, I think that that's such a cool resource. Speaking of Map Your Health, not only for childless individuals out there who are interested in their own personal health, but also for families and people who have kids. Like that's super meaningful. Because you're right, it's I guess maybe not often thought about in terms of unintended consequences of, obviously you assume you're running outside, you're going for a walk outside with your family, you know, you're splashing around in that water hole or that lake or whatever it might be, right? And the unintended consequences of, hey, is this actually a net negative for me and my family to be doing this activity, which very interesting. So whether it's from Map Your Health, the Vegan Report podcast, or what you're doing in terms of being a fundraising consultant, what are some transformations or trends?
Um, Transformations or trends. Well, before that, let me comment on what you just said about Map Your Health. Doing this work for the past months and just uncovering the sources of contaminants in different locations has made me a bit, I would say, emotional. Thinking about the families, mostly vulnerable populations. So, like you said, children, but also elderly people who are exposed to those contaminants, to those toxic contaminants. Yeah, so I do greatly believe in that work. Again, following my heart here. Um, about transformation, um, that's an interesting word. I don't use it often. I feel like I've always been the same person, always faithful to the same um, principles and views. But then, it's weird how you change by following the same values. Um, and by that, I mean, here you are um, believing in uh, giving more exposure to issues that deserve more shed light on the public square, and you find yourself from stemming from that principle, from that belief, launching first a podcast about social issues, and then a vegan podcast, and then becoming a vegan activist, like a fully on vegan activist. um, I'm still faithful to that same sentiment, to that same intention, but that led me into this road of becoming this vegan activist, animal rights activist. Um, so yeah, it is something wonderful. We're all from Canada. Um, Something that truly inspires me about Canada um, is the passing of the seasons. That is something that philosophically I get a lot of things from that, from contemplating that. Um, how winter can become summer, and how um, you need to learn to love winter throughout those 6 harsh months that we get. And those are also lessons that you can apply in your entrepreneurial journey. When things get hard, you need to remember that summer is, at our doorstep. It doesn't look like it. It looks like 10 feet of snow outside, but you need to believe that summer is coming up, um, and also learning to love winter. um, um, Learn to love the challenge, um, not alienate yourself from that season. So yeah, things like that I ponder upon, and yeah.
Awesome. Love it. We'll touch more back on that later towards the end. And for context, the the intention behind sort of the transformation or trend question is, earlier on it was really just sort of framed as what are the trends in your industry, and then we started to recognize that, by virtue a trend is something that comes and it goes. We're really interested in finding out maybe like the next level of a trend, which is an actual transformation, like a consumer decision, like an actual transformation in how consumers are seeing things, right? Like having a trend of uh, less single-use plastic, I guess, isn't as comforting as an actual transformation towards um, actual recyclable, whatever it might be. And so, just for context, that's the framework of the question
I'm
about trends and transformations.
I'm sorry, I went all philosophical and psychological with
No,
this
it's cool.
question. But if you're talking about trends in the industry, which is more, suited for business talk, yeah, talking about Map Your Health and environmental health, I think that we're going to more personalized approach to environmental health. What do I mean by that? Well, I believe that the future holds, for instance, um, uh, home-based water filter systems. I think that we're going to drive away from those, centralized water treatment plants, since we're understanding more and more that those are failures. And of course, it depends of your location. Some are more performant than others, but I think that we're going to a model where, everyone takes care of their own health and takes care of, battling the contaminant in the environment. Not because we're a more individualistic society or something like that, but it's just more efficient. The centralized model is not that efficient, and we're seeing how dysfunctional it is right now. So that is environmental health. I think there's this whole conversation with Maha, and there is momentum there about health. um, there's a kind of people are more and more waking up to the invisible things that are harming their health. Um, but still, environmental health is the blind spot of their health community. I always like to make that comment. Um, I think we do pay a lot of attention now to what we're eating and to fitness and psychology, but not so much to the environment. Yet the environment is a really big factor, and I think that's the next big thing in the health community. Waking up to the environment, and how dangerous it can be for our health. There's also the fact that we're reindustrializing North America, with all of those tariffs and all of those plants, coming in, moving to the U.S. And um, I think that it will come with its share of pollutants, contaminants in the air, in the water, and people will be more aware of that. Um, about fundraising, I would say the big trend right now that everybody is talking about, and not just in the fundraising space, is of course AI. So artificial intelligence, whether you're using that for grants, writing grants, or creating impact reports or whatever, they're used at every flavor, and I love that. I truly embrace that, and I am a big proponent of AI. I believe, I've heard people in the fundraising space and in many other industries talking about AI as if AI was cheating, or AI was unethical, or AI was taking away from human contribution. But I think it's just a tool. It won't replace humans. It's just, Microsoft. It's just, the car. It's just one more tool in our arsenal. And we should look at it this way and stop with this crazy talk of, you know, um, don't use AI, use your own brain. And, you know, my clients are charities. They use, they don't have a big budget for, fundraising. So if I can save them time by using AI and save them money, then I'm happy to oblige. It makes me more productive. And just like I won't, start criticizing cars and start walking everywhere, I won't, criticize AI and start uh, writing grants line by line for hours. So that's those are my comments for fundraising. And then lastly, um, veganism. Now, veganism, there's all this talk about um, lab grown, well, they don't like that term, cultivated meat. And, I've uncovered through my podcast, through conversations with activists, that there's a kind of a tension that is not talked about much around this industry, which is, do we go full on, cultivated meat, or is this just, you know, a shimmer, like a false, like this won't get us anywhere, and we're just wasting our money on this bet that if we get cultivated meat, then the transition to an, a world more compassionate towards animals is closer. Um, right now, I'm on the side of the people criticizing, cultivated meat. I think that um, if people had replaced, um, uh, you know, their diet to a plant-based diet, they would have done so with Beyond Meat, with Impossible Burger. With I think that the taste of their products is really close, if not very similar to meat products that and dairy, egg meat products we have on the market. And if there was a change, it should have happened at that moment when those products were launched, with the Tofurky Beyond and Impossible of this world. But it did not happen. And I think it's an indication that this problem is cultural. It's social, it's psychological, it's not a market problem, it's not an economical problem. So yeah, that's how I feel right now. Maybe I'll change my mind. What's great with being a podcaster is you get all of those different opinions, and I always say to my listeners, I've changed my mind several times through having discussions with guests on my positions. So yeah.
I'm so glad that we went back to that. That was so great. Thank you. Now, this next question we always frame to folks, right? Because we're really dealing a lot with like founders of different companies and such. And it's sort of, what are you personally, or what is your organization doing in terms of giving back or charity, or what does that mean to you? And, we've had tons of different answers from, in-kind product sponsorships at events to actually donating money to a myriad of different things. Um, Primarily centered around marginalized communities, whether that's animals or non-human animals. But you're a really unique guest to speak on this. So just kind of open-ended when you hear about like giving back and charity, are you doing anything through your organizations outside of your it's interesting because your work is doing that, but what does that mean to you and how would you like to answer about giving back and charity?
Of course. Well, I always like to say that I'm a I'm a donor, I'm a giver before I'm a fundraiser. You know, I know what it feels like to give, to make a donation, to give your time. It feels great. It is incredibly meaningful, um, uh, spiritual in value, um, very important in my life, in my faith. Um, it's something that drives me. And I always tell charities, you're the best because you give the world the opportunity to practice giving. And that is just amazing, because you're giving us uh, an incredible experience of joy and meaning in our life. And so that's what I want to offer donors. That's what I want to offer sponsors, that experience, the same experience I value as a donor. And of course, as a fundraiser, I'm sensitive to the means of um, my clients, and I have given countless pro bono hours to nonprofits and causes out there. It is something that I always love to do. You know, I don't believe in keeping knowledge for yourself, and I don't believe in the non-collaborative approach. In being competitive, at least in the fundraising space, because we're talking about saving lives. We're talking about vulnerable populations, and you can't just be mindless like that. So I share my knowledge. I share, my services, um, and I've actually used my podcast for that. I've recorded now 2 episodes on the topic of fundraising. One where it's a one-on-one with my listeners, um, where it's a monologue where I just talk about fundraising and give great advice about what you should do, what you should consider um, as a fundraiser. And the second one was one where I reconnected with my college teacher, who taught me all about fundraising. I loved her. This woman is kind of my model in the fundraising world. She always has been, very kind-hearted and generous to me, and she offered her time, as a podcast guest to be interviewed about all things related to fundraising. I bring her up because she's a superstar in the fundraising world. She has raised millions and millions and millions of dollars for all sorts of charities, um, and so her advice is greatly valuable. And those resources are free. If you're a struggling charity, if you don't understand how to launch yourself in fundraising activities, you should go and listen to those episodes, or you should just message me and ask for advice. It's free again, and I would be happy to oblige. And I would say it's also important for funders to learn and educate themselves about fundraising. I think by doing so, they get a better understanding of the value of the causes they are supporting, and the internal struggle of the nonprofits they are supporting in terms of fundraising. So I think that, for instance, a wise donor should look at the fundraising model structure of a nonprofit and see if they are investing enough time and resources in that structure, because it's the first indicator of the lifespan of a nonprofit. If they're not doing their due diligence in terms of fundraising, they won't live long, as a nonprofit. They will most likely be bankrupt or close their doors after a few years. In fact, I think the number given in studies is like 6 to 7 years. So do you want to really, put your money in uh, a nonprofit that will close in a few years? That's a question you need to ask yourself. And I know that the biggest some of the biggest funders I have ever met um, are experienced enough to ask the question of what is your fundraising structure? What is your business model in terms of, nonprofit? Are you investing time in mobilizing small donors, medium level donors? What's your strategic plan for the next 5 years in terms of fundraising? They want to know that the cause they are um, giving to, investing their money and resources in, is sustainable, that there's someone at the wheel. So yeah, from that perspective, fundraising is not a plus. Getting fundraising professionals is not a luxury; it is a necessity. So yeah.
That just made me think visually of if these organizations aren't already doing so. You go to an organization's website and they have an About Us page, and it's, likely pretty standard, but kind of reframing that to like a roadmap, like instead of an about us, like a roadmap page, and exactly everything that you just said, like just laying all the cards out on the table, like what is the structure, how are we mobilizing, what different areas are we mobilizing, and all of that on this sort of roadmap to your point, using the language like you said, like how are we steering this, how are we actually operating here at the wheel, and having that readily available for people, I think would be a good reframe for organizations to think about moving away from a standard About Us page to something more meaningful that people can kind of sink their teeth into. So thanks for sharing that. Now, um, obviously, the Vegan Report podcast, Map Your Health, like you just said, outstanding resources for lots of different reasons. But with that being said, whether it's relating to, again, veganism, fundraising, environmental health, are there any other resources, books, podcasts, apps, things that you would suggest other people look at?
Yeah, I I I am hesitant to, recommend uh, resources by name. Um, since coming into this space of, media and content creation and all of that, I've met some of the people, behind the content, and um, some of the podcasts I would listen to like religiously, I stopped listening to because I know the people behind them and they're not, the best people. And so, yeah, I became very hesitant to recommend, uh, resources. Um, but, let me maybe recommend The Mind Workout. That is a book written by a monk called Banti Sari, who's the president of Dharma Voices for Animals. I recorded an interview recently with him, and it's about meditation. And I want to tie this to, self-care. I think it's important to have meditation as a tool in your toolbox. I do think that it will make you more successful in life. And I include, your professional life in there. I'm, of course, a big believer in meditation practice. Um, you know, and I do believe that you should invest in taking care of yourself. Um, doesn't have, to be, purchasing books or something. I will, promote um, Buddhism here and say you can visit a monastery for a couple of days, for a weekend. Monasteries are amazing for entrepreneurs because they're the opposite of an entrepreneurial lifestyle. It's complete silence, no music, no entertainment of any kind, no people, no very solitary life. And you're just there alone, meditating, alone with your thoughts, and you get to be mindful of that. And someone is just for a couple of days, a weekend, you won't die from it. Someone is putting a mirror before you and saying, hey, this is the state of your mind right now. You should know that. And just by spending time there, you get more relaxed. After a meditation retreat, when I go back to the world, I'm all the time, overwhelmed. I can't, you know, um, I don't, it's difficult to realize how overwhelmed with visual stimulations, sound stimulations, all the notifications you get in your phone, all of that. So go to a monastery, spend a weekend in a monastery. They're free, just drive yourself there, and ask them to stay a weekend. I do think it's important to invest in that.
Love it. I recently heard a saying, and I'll have to think. It's your true self is the sky, the observer, not the clouds, your thoughts. So similar to kind of what you're talking about there, I think.
Yes,
Now,
it's a Tibetan saying, and it's beautiful to have that as a mantra for your meditation. It's really helpful.
beautiful, beautiful. Uh, Throughout this conversation, I think it's very apparent to everybody who and what inspires you. You've mentioned beautifully, I think, we can all probably agree, like the passing of the seasons, which you kind of roped into sort of advice and tips in terms of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, knowing summer is going to be coming, and some different pieces you've given us. You also mentioned the college teacher. I know before we hit record, you said you're not the best with names, but do you remember her name as a shout out for that?
Yes, her name is Marina Boulos Winton.
Okay, easy to spell. So, with all that being said, is there when we ask people that our special guest the question, who or what inspires you, does anything else come up?
My parents, of course, my parents who are also entrepreneurs, in spirit, and they are immigrants who came to this country, brought me to this country, Canada, when I was 7 years old. That's the, I think that's the summum of entrepreneurial endeavors, because they left everything behind. Their professional network, the progress they had made, their friends, their family, all of that for a better future, for freedom, for a freer life, um, and the gift of a future for their children. It's a beautiful story, and I think that's why so many immigrants are entrepreneurs as well. Um, I think they have that in their blood. They're not afraid of taking risks. Once you've sacrificed everything that you hold dear, what you know, which should you be afraid of? Of opening a business, it's nothing. You've just changed entire culture and country. So, um, of course, my parents, I always see them as pioneers, and they opened their own businesses at points in their life. So I do believe that I take it from them, and yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Again, too, like lots of nuggets throughout the conversation, really powerful things. I think I'll just kind of summarize a few. You mentioned like not gatekeeping. You mentioned being able to change your mind. You mentioned being able to trust your instinct. And we could probably have a whole hour conversation. We won't do that now, but a whole another hour long conversation about your thoughts about like cultivating and growing your instinct muscle. But with all of that, big open-ended question for the end here. Advice, lessons, tips for those listening who are focused on business and entrepreneurship.
Mm. I think the best quality you can have is really your outlook um, on life. I know it feels cheesy to say that, but being positive is really powerful. And let me tie this to Buddhism. There's a monk called Ajahn Brahm, and he gives this beautiful metaphor of about karma. So he talks about karma, but you can apply that to anything. He says, you get. It's not about the ingredients you get. Some of us get, organic, top-notch, luxury products. Others, get, not so important things and, very, low quality ingredients. Um, it's about the cook. It's about the skills of the cook because you could get the best ingredients in the world and just burn them down and burn the kitchen with it. Just like you could be, the best cook in the world and make the best meal ever from you know leftovers. And ask yourself, what do you want? Do you want to get the best ingredients delivered to your house, or do you want, Gordon Ramsay to make all of your meals with any ingredients he comes across, just, low quality ingredients? And of course, the answer is Gordon Ramsay. We want the skills. We want the person who has invested so much in their uh, you know skills, in their savoir-faire, expertise. So yeah, be positive. It's not about what you get, it's about what you make of it, and keep at it.
Now, Ryan, lots of, I think, really fun conversations and different things that we talked about today. But is there anything maybe in the conversations that we've had that we missed or you want to go back to and kind of double down on, or anything else maybe that you want to share about? Just kind of leave the floor open for you here at the end.
Good question. I mean, going back to that conversation about environmental contaminants, you should invest in a water filter. Just, an advice. Um, I won't name brands, but make sure that they cover most contaminants like pesticides that we find outside. Protect your family, protect your children, your loved one, your parents. And this can be a gift, I think Father's Day is coming. So think about, maybe offering a water filter bottle or something to your dad. That is a sweet gift.
Awesome. Love that. So everybody, if you want to find out more, you can anywhere that you listen to podcasts, you can find the Vegan Report podcast. On Instagram, you can find at Vegan Report Podcast. Rayane Laddi is spelled Rayane, and last name Laddi. So you can connect with Ryan on LinkedIn, and like he said, he's very open and easily accessible if you want to reach out personally and individually and start a conversation there. So everybody who's been listening, who's here with us live, thanks for being here. Everybody who's listening to this on your own, thank you for spending some time with us. Ryan, of course, we really appreciate your time and everything that you had to share today. Thank you so much for being here. And just a reminder, this is another episode of Veg Networking Canada, where we had a great conversation with the founder of the Vegan Report podcast and Map Your Health, Rayane Laddi. Thank you so much, everybody. We will catch you soon. Take care. Bye for now.